Thank you. We're going to discuss our experience about the Discover project's presence in OpenSim. We're going to present some qualitative results from assessing scenario-based learning for carers of the elderly. Now, about the Discover project. It was a project which was meant to evaluate carers' knowledge of digital technologies, provide easy access to information on a wide range of relevant healthcare areas, and support carers' networking and collaborative learning. On another strand, it aimed for lifelong care training and education, as well as enhancing their decision-making capacities. Now, the means were an experiential learning paradigm and the use as an enabler of a tutoring online e-learning environment. The expected results were social inclusion and vocational skills for formal and informal carers, with emphasis on those socially and financially excluded. Now, about scenario-based learning in virtual patients, this is a topic that was discussed in other sessions quite extensively. In short, they are interactive scenarios that support active learning strategies. It engages learners through storytelling, either narratively or experientially. It involves negotiating complex, ill-structured problems, and the learners need, in order to cope with this, subject knowledge, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. It simulates real-life situations without risk. It's a non-linear approach to problem-solving and provides feedback opportunities at many points, as well as enables dynamic, custom facilitator system support according to learner performance. Now, one quick look at the internet can provide a lot of platforms for web-based virtual patients. So a natural next step, which has been done for quite some time, was the scenario-based learning in experiential 3D environments. With the proliferation of 3D games, there has been a significant presence of those in medical education. Now, using OpenSim as a 3D virtual environment for our approach. Its pros are that it's a well-developed 3D multi-user virtual environment. It provides opportunities for collaboration. It has a rapid deployment cycle due to simple scripting capacities. It has a significant asset pool from users and has a prolific user base due to approximately from 2009 to present Second Life boom in educational content, especially in medical education. Now for the cons, it's a rather cumbersome scripting environment also because it's so easy to use. It has a dated engine which limits graphical fidelity and as also has been pointed in a recent keynote we heard, it has seen its prime and now seems to be in decline. Now, why Discover in OpenSim? Well, for the pros, it's quite straightforward. The experiential content was a prerequisite, as well as the collaboration opportunities. The easy scripting provides easy content creation capacities. The ready art assets provides also a very easy environment to create graphically rich content, and the awareness of the platform is rather significant. Now, as for the cons, the cumbersome scripting is overcome with a simple point-and-click scenario approach. The dated engine can be coped with because the target group, which was middle to elder Greek adults, does not require high graphics fidelity. Most of them are not really experienced with it. And although it has seen its prime, it's rather adequate for prototyping. Now, designing for carers. Some things that we took in consideration when designing the cases. The target group's simple narrative interface. Due to the target audience's average age, a more textual narrative was chosen. We wanted to have a minimal learning curve. Due to Discover's demographic, with below average expected digital skills, it was decided for no keyboard shortcuts and all expected interaction to be described through text. The learners were told that they should click at that point of furniture or that part of the screen in order to interact. Cognitive simplicity. It was decided to use straightforward descriptions and interactions within the virtual environment. Now, as for the learning style, it was chosen to be simple instead of impactful. The scenarios branching was designed so that errors had no permanent consequences, but allowed for reflection and retry. Also, for physical abilities, due to the target group's composition, as was mentioned twice before, the case was designed without reflex-based or time-sensitive activities. Now, implementing the scenario-based learning discover case in OpenSim. We chose to implement the simple point-and-click adventure game. The users were given a description of the narrative, and then they chose to click at certain points of the geometry in order to receive feedback and proceed. It was familiar to carers. There were used familiar to carers graphical assets, and there were simple multiple-choice note cards or clicking in the geometry for choices. Now, for scripting considerations, we maintained Open Labyrinth's node structure within OpenSim scripting environment. We actually designed invisible phantom nodes which contained the cases, narrative, and flow. And we established some approach of reusable node coding. All the difference between the nodes were kept in the textual resources used as variable in the scripts. Now, for some results from testing this scenario. We had 10 testers, 8 males and 2 females. 7 were informal carers, and 3 were formal. Ages ranged from 45-year-old to 60. The process that was followed was that the testers were invited to specially prepared computer lab in teams of 3 to 5 persons. They were familiarized with the environment, and a small tutorial about the use was given. They ran the scenario on their own, and then they were debriefed for approximately 15 to 20 minutes through loosely structured interviews. The interview axes were the overall impression of the case, a discussion of the pros and cons, as well as suggestions and personal contribution. Now, about the result. The words that came up quite frequently was interesting, experiential, enhanced experience compared to the web-based. I must note that some of the carers were also exposed to the Discover platform, which in Greece contained virtual cases in Open Labyrinth. Now, one thing that really intrigued us was that some specific persons mentioned tacit training through simple but familiar visuals. It mentioned that the virtual environment of a home is familiar to the user, specific spaces, defined movement. You can get acclimated to the spaces that a cared for person would feel at home in. Another interesting outcome was that OpenSim was mentioned as a training break, that it can refresh the learner and can leave him or her ready for more formal training. Also, the deliberate pacing for learning through choice was mentioned. The scenario is realized through a game. It relaxes the carer and makes her feel more calm and ready to make decisions. Now, it wasn't all good and rosy, though. There were some improvements asked. One was that of training intensification. There was no need to teach the obvious. No common sense questions. And there should be more information density in the case. Also, case complexity and variety was desired. More cases, increased complexity, less guided, not to state the obvious, as was mentioned, and more critical, impactful decisions. Contrary to our initial perception, we were quite pedantic towards our target group. The target group was rather mature. Also, a richer content was suggested. Some people have seen their children games, and they said it would be best if there was more stuff in the house to be even more like a real home. And also, it was suggested that multisensory engagement was desired. Some users suggested that it would be best to have audio narrative instead of simple textual description. One interesting result conclusion that came from this is that Greek adults are really catching up to the digital age at this point in time. Now, for future work, that moves in two strands. One is to enrich the environment, add audio narration, and increase the case's environmental complexity. The other is towards content diversification to design larger, more complex scenarios, include more impactful decisions with various fail states. I watched a very interesting workshop some 2 days ago about that, which pretty much covered all the points that came up during this assessment from Professor Poulton, and import more web-based cases for variety of content. And even more future work, one point that's especially interesting is the attempt to create procedural scenarios. The code reusability that was implemented during the creation of the scenarios, the streamlined game context, and the narrative-to-code compartmentalization can facilitate reuse or modification at the node level and allow for personalized, dynamic customization of content through the use of analytics in real time. The potential for personalized, custom narrative-based, scenario-based learning episodes in carer training, and not only on that field, exists, but it requires an infrastructure for dynamic node altering, which we hope to present you some months. Thank you very much for your time.
Any question?
I have one about OpenSim, and because you gave us a good idea about using OpenSim for this particular task, you think is substandard as a virtual world for this kind of activity, or how does it compare to other? What's the other one? Open Wonderland?
No, it's actually not another one. It's many others, but
yeah.
From what little we have developed and have seen, OpenSim is the de facto standard in education, medical or otherwise, because it's quite accessible. It's very easy to code in. However, it's very cumbersome. In his keynote, Professor Poulton had mentioned that it's in his decline, and this is actually quite correct. Thing is that to develop something else, you really have to go into custom solutions. We are currently trying to deploy something through Unity, which is also a rather good, rapid development environment. And we hope to transfer at some point all this work in a custom solution.
Any other question?
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. We ourselves have been much involved in the past in virtual worlds, and of course many people have done, and it hasn't gained as much traction as you might expect, bearing in mind how long it's been going on. OpenSim is not new. And one of the reasons is, of course, that you have to put so much effort into creating new material all the time. So from a cost benefit approach, do you think, once you've made your system and then someone's played it, they've got to actually then move on? And I think that's one of the reasons that it falls into disuse often. I mean, can you keep it up? The funding model is actually not a good one for these things.
That's exactly the point of focusing on this last work. Actually, the experiential part, you saw I left it in passing. This actually is something that could be proved to be promising. if you can reuse the content, if you can create a streamlined workflow that may allow for content to be developed in, well, now it's been developed in days. If we can manage to develop a virtual patient, a whole virtual patient, in hours, then we'll have content that's relevant, content volume that's relevant for that. You'll have to use the microphone, I can hear you.
What about if you put the player inside the content, using wearable devices like Oculus? Then you don't have to create the content. You are inside the content.
Actually, there is a way to put the player in the content when you manage to create an infrastructure for node-to-node repurposing and editing. You can crowdsource the content creation process. But that requires some kind of low granularity repurposing editing capacity, which we think is currently lacking in 3D virtual environments. It's rather easy to edit text. That's exactly the approach we're taking for the repurposing. At the moment, we're repurposing through text editing and point-and-click adventure. We'll have to see where it gets us.
We have time for the last question. Please, Verena, go ahead.
That was a really interesting presentation. I was just curious about the fact that you chose a textual approach for your older carers, whereas we found that quite a lot of old carers preferred visual images rather than text and had asked us to cut down on text. I wondered what your sort of findings were.
Yeah, our initial guess was that they would be more familiar with reading instead of being, visually in an alien environment. Many many adults, Greek adults especially, are quite intimidated with the 3D environment. How do I move there? Now where do I go? We have developed a virtual patient for dentistry some time ago, and some of the students which were 20-year-olds told us that, I got lost, I couldn't find the case. So we decided to keep it very simple. As it proved, you were right, our participants require richer content and they require more senses engagement. As I said, we were quite pedantic in our assumptions about them, but it's one of the things that we wanted to explore.
Thank you, Panagiotis.
Thank you.